I wanted to share with you a little bit of my personal experience and journey with this question of community. It starts a long time ago. When I was a kid, I grew up in the community of the Esalen Institute on the coast of Big Sur, California. I lived there off and on from the time I was fairly small, and then really solidly for the years when my father was sick, and those years for when I was 9 to when I was 12. And it was a moment. He died in 1980, so we were there full time from 1976-ish to 1980, sort of little bit of comings and going. But that moment was such an incredible moment. And Esalen was a place to be where there was something important happening. That when I think right now, when we're thinking about community, this thing is important to consider. And the thing is that when we look back at that moment at Esalen, if you know any of that history, what you'll know is that Gabrielle Roth was there, Joseph Campbell was there, my dad was there, Alan Watts was there. There is this collection of 70s cultural superheroes, counterculture superheroes. And if you just look at that, you're going to not actually see what happened. And so it's important to me to think about what's really going on there at that time and what made it possible for there to be this kind of mutual learning that was taking place in that very special time, in that very special place, in that very special environment. What were the conditions for that? I want to start there because this notion of mutual learning is probably the most important part, I think, of community, and how those conditions of mutual learning are nurtured is really much more important than the vision or the agreement or the intention or the mission or the model or the. What we were seeing there was that these people who later became superstars of that era were just people. And what made it possible for them to explore new ideas was that they were in a place that was absolutely not like the rest of the world. It was absolutely not. For one thing, you could take off your clothes. I mean, this is the 70s, okay? So these were the things that unlocked the doors in the 70s. There was all sorts of drug use going on. There was meditation. There was body work. There was all kinds of diet experiments going on. There was spirituality. There was all sorts of things, psychics. And these things changed the boundaries of what could be explored. This is really important, all right? So if the world is made of relationships and relationships are made of communication, then we might be tempted to look at the communication and say, how can we have the kind of communication that makes mutual learning? That's the wrong question. The question is, how do we allow for what's possible in the whole realm of communication to change? And that in itself is mutual learning. I just made a shift with you here. So usually we would think about how to make a model, how to figure out who does what are the roles to create the perfect sort of solution for how to do this. And I would say on the whole that that's kind of colonial thinking. That is mechanized thinking. That is the kind of thinking that is going to be a disappointment, to put it mildly, because people won't keep up with their roles. They won't keep believing in their roles. People will learn and grow and change. And when people learn and grow and change together, they start to bump into each other. Now, at Esalen, we were in the heart of the let's just all gestalt and communicate all our issues and we'll get through it all. And of course, that was just nonsense. It was so much drama. So much drama. But something important really did happen there. And when I look back on it, one of the ways that I would describe it is just that it was a little bit crazy. So as a kid, I remember showing up to the lodge for dinner and all the grown-ups had titanium pyramids on their heads. Or there were times when there was a psychic who came who could draw things. She would channel this group of celestial spirits. And this celestial spirit guide group actually made it up to the managers' meetings and started making decisions for the community. I'm telling you this because I want you to feel the looseness. Okay, there is a looseness that has taken place. And that looseness was not safe. People got hurt. Kids got hurt. Grown-ups got hurt. People got hurt. It wasn't safe, but nothing is safe, actually. Particularly not culture change. It's not safe. And the other thing that's even more not safe is not making a space for culture change. So what I saw was this group of grown-ups who knew that they were trapped in ways of thinking that they wanted to get out of. And they didn't know how to get out of it, so they were trying absolutely everything. They weren't sure if the trap was in the food, if it was in the sexual habits, if it was in the psychic state, if it was spiritual, if it was all of the above, if it was intellectual. There was fantastic things, if it was in the body. So they just tried everything. Now, in today's world, there's really no need to repeat that. Okay, the ways in which they loosened things are not the ways in which we need to loosen things. That revolution happened. We have a different one now. So this is not a sort of instruction manual of how to get things loose. It's the looseness itself that I want to bring in. And I think for me, as a child growing up in that, what really impressed me for my whole life was this image of the adult world in a rather desperate state of learning. Not just learning, but learning like, I got to get out of this epistemological trap I'm in. I need to break my soul free. I want my body to be free. I want my mind to be free. I want to be creative. I want to give something to the world. I want to get out of the shackles. Okay, there were this kind of imprisonment of the United States in the 50s that people were still trying to get out of, their gender trips and their blah, blah, blah. All right, now, in this moment, I'm living in my house in Sweden, and I have my 93-year-old mother here, and I have my 25-year-old son and his girlfriend, and my Swedish stepkids, and my Swedish husband, and we are learning something really important, which is we have some chickens, we have a big garden, and we have a dog, and there are meals to make. And there are dishes to do, and there are groceries to tend to, and gardens to tend to, and trees to trim, and work to be done. There's work to be done. And one of the things that I am seeing is that we don't actually know how to be in communal relationships. There is an attempt at trying to figure that out. Should we make a chore wheel? Should we assign various tasks to different people? And if we make the chore wheel, what does that actually do? What is that a replacement for? And part of what that's a replacement for is actually having the perception of what needs to get done and the way in which we are holding ourselves together in that moment. If we have to have a chore wheel, it's because we can't actually respond to each other's complexity in the moment. So if I give my kids that, then it doesn't matter who's tired or who has homework or what's going on. If it's Tuesday, it's this kid's dish day. And if it's Wednesday, it's somebody else's dish day. Again, we're back in mechanistic thinking. Okay, I just want to point out how quickly you can slide into that. So what are the ways in which we might think about, even in this intergenerational kind of community, how those relationships and how the communication happens that allows the relationships to be alive in the work and the tasks and the learning, to keep learning and moving together instead of compartmentalizing. So my son is awesome. He nailed it. I said, This was some years ago. And I said to him, hey, Trevor, can you take out the trash? And he said to me, yeah, Mom, I'll be happy to take out the trash, but can you give me a half an hour to forget it was your idea? And that's what I'm talking about. Somehow there was a space for that communication to happen there. And when he said that, I realized that by asking him to take the trash, I was also saying, you didn't notice that the trash needs to get taken out. And I'm now having to tell you. And there was all this meta messaging coming in that was actually, frankly, not fun. Makes him not want to take the trash. So bravo, Trevor, with the just wait a half an hour and let me forget it was your idea. Because he set me free and he set himself free when he did that. And he reclaimed his dignity and, frankly, mine too, in that moment of how to be in mutual learning, intergenerationally, interculturally, and interspecies. How do we be in relationship? And the thing is that after generations of being in this world where you get your kids ready for school and you send them off to school and you help them with their homework and you teach them manners because you're going to need to know this when you're alone in the world, right? That's the message. It's all over everything you do. This is how you clean your room because you're going to need to know this when you're out there on your own. And this meta messaging is coming through everything. Now, what would the meta messages be if we weren't planning for our kids to leave? How would we raise them differently if we knew they were staying? What would that even look like? I'm bringing that in because I just want for 1 second for you to feel the conditioning of all these notions of my boundaries and what's in it for me and what am I going to get out of this? All of this way of thinking that has been sneaking in. It's been sneaking in. And now we need each other to do what needs to be done to live in the way that we need to be able to live in the coming decades. We actually can't do it alone. It's actually not possible. My kids are not going to go out in the world and go get a job and buy an apartment and live as individual professionals. That moment is past. So how now in this moment do we begin to think about what is the communication that makes it possible to keep those relationships in vitality and alive? And one of the things that's interesting about this is that in the communities that I've lived in, so I went from Esalen to living in the San Francisco Zen Center. And then from there, I lived in another community in Santa Cruz and then another one. I've been through some of this. And one of the things that goes wrong is that there's a back door. And for the most part, people who are exploring with communal living and collaborative process are doing so out of choice. It's a pretty privileged group, right? Especially with intentional communities. And so there is this sense of, I'm going to do this as long as it feels good to me. And when it stops feeling good to me, I'm out. And that is not going to make it possible to shift the communication in the way that it needs to shift. The back door, this is why this thing with my family right now is so fascinating to me, because there's no back door. There is no back door. There is no like, well, if this isn't working for me, I'll just go somewhere else. This is my family. These are my kids. This is my mom. She's 93. I can't leave her. I can't leave them. And I need them and they need me. And we are now in interdependency in a way that's going to be very difficult for me to just back out of. So in those moments, when I would like to say, you're stepping on my ego, you're whatever this thing is, I don't feel seen, whatever that thing is, I have to figure a way to communicate that actually allows the other relationships to flourish, like an ecology. A community is like an ecology. And if a community is like an ecology, then every communication and relationship that's happening in that community shifts as the other ones shift. It's not like you can just change one and fix one part, eliminate one person off the island, sort of thing, or fix one person, or pathologize one person. What's happening is happening in the ecology of relationships. So that makes people, members of a community, essentially like the organisms in a meadow. And if you want the meadow to keep being a meadow, the meadow has to continually change. This is why mission statements are a bummer, because everybody's got to be able to keep learning and learning together and responding to each other. And some of that is not so comfortable, but that's our job. How are we going to hold that? What does that feel like?
Find out more on advaya.life.